Good evening. It's nice to see some people here. I do not have the Zoom up myself, so I don't know how many people are in the chain, but 28 so far, so that's great. Okay, so I'm going to call our committee to order, then Gus will call his committee to order for the joint meeting, and then we'll kind of go over some ground rules and then rules, and then we'll just open it up to talking. So I will now call to order this April 7th, 2022 session of the Medfield School Committee, beginning with a roll call.
OBrien here.
All right, trying to figure my people out. Annamae O'Shea-Brooke here.
Tim right here.
And Jessica O'Brien here. I expect Michelle Kirkby, who had a prior commitment for a few minutes just before this. She will be here soon. So this meeting is being recorded tonight, and it will be posted to the Medfield TV YouTube channel. Gus, would you like to call in?
Yeah, call the Board of Selectmen to order, and everything that Jeff said about the meeting applies to ours as well. But let's just do a quick roll call. So,
Ivan Murphy.
okay,
Elizabeth Peterson.
and Gus Morby.
Great. So I do want to come in. Oh, here she is. This is Michelle. So I don't have my So, all right, it's off now. Great. Okay, so I do want to thank you for being here tonight and engaging with us. I'm having a bit of a hard time trying to figure out exactly where to look, so I'm going to look at the owl, and then I'll look at the camera, and then I'll look at you. Tonight is a listening session, and we decided to do this jointly during our workshop between the select board, selectmen, soon to be board, and the school committee. And we decided because we wanted to hear the community's future-focused thoughts about how to create a facility that meets the educational needs of our town and also achieves a level of consensus that kind of reasonably ensures that there could be passage at town meeting and at a ballot vote. So tonight, just for some ground rules, we will accept comments from the room as well as on video. In addition, after the session, there is a Google Doc form posted on the town and school websites. It will open up at 9 o'clock. For additional reflection, those times where you think, oh, I wish I had said this, or I hadn't really thought of that, please use that. That will be open for a week until just before our school committee meeting on the 14th. It is also on the school website. Gus and I expect this session to take about 2 hours, perhaps less. And if we're looking at more than that, we'll probably look to another session so we can kind of continue to hear from you with fresh ears. In the spirit of moving forward, though, we ask that you don't propose specific architectural plans or really lobby one way or another, but talk to us about process. Talk to us about your tolerances. Talk to us about communication, how we make decisions as a town, how boards make decisions, and how do we, and this is, I think, so important, how do we directly and accurately communicate town projects? Not just the school committee, not just the select board, but whatever board, school building committee, or future planning boards. How do we communicate directly to you and receive your feedback directly back to us in a way that is meaningful and in a way that allows you to feel heard? Because I think that that's really the most important part about this, that this is a beginning of a whole new, not new, but it's a fresh start for us at this point. Let's try to figure out how we do this as a community in the project that we have ahead of us, but also over time. Because this is not going to be the first project that we have, and it is not going to be the last. So you may hear some strongly held opinions tonight, and you may hear things that people have misunderstood or believed, and then they present them as known facts, and we'll try to address them as we hear them, because there's a lot of information out there. But it's possible we might not catch them, or that if we corrected something,
particularly something fairly small, we don't want to derail the spirit of the listening and of the meeting. Okay, so in that spirit, we ask each person here or on Zoom to acknowledge that you speak for yourself, that those who have been heard at length before, during, or after the previous vote maybe give those who were not heard quite as much a little bit of room. And we'll just ask for grace through this meeting, and we will return that as well. Okay. So Gus, do you have opening statements?
It's not a statement, but it's some comments, at least speaking on the Board of Selectmen side, and from a personal perspective as a member of that board. The process we went through last fall, among other things, wound up polarizing the town. And so the reason for this, before we have a building committee, before we actually are on the railroad tracks to trying to move forward with a new school, at this point in time, the reason here is to certainly listen and to hear what people have in mind, but it's also to set a different tone about how the overall conversations in the town go. So the idea, in the hope at least of this meeting, is that we can have some conversations where we kind of rediscover the quality of conversations that we've always had in Medfield. That doesn't mean they haven't been tested. We've had some pretty sore, stressful conversations, but somehow at the end, we always came out in a spot where everybody sort of understood what they didn't agree with across the board, but they understood the resolution of all that got us to a place that at least the vast majority of people here in town could sign up for and say, yeah, this is, maybe it's not exactly what I wanted, but it's not a bad thing. So the method to the madness here tonight is to not get dragged back down into specific arguments about particular details. It's really asking you, what is it that you would like the town to keep in mind as we move forward with a reconceived school project? What do you think we should keep in mind around, I don't mean the specific design of the school, but if there's things about the school and what it becomes or how it's gonna be that you think are important at a broad, bold, objective quality standpoint, we want to hear those. And if there are things about the way we go about getting to that school that you think are important in terms of how we engage the public, how we listen, how there's a back and forth at key times. Obviously, we can't do this every night of the week when we're trying to push a school forward, but if there's things that we should keep in mind about how we go about doing business here, that's what we want to at least start to take away tonight. And with this Google Doc that will be up there, it's going to give people more opportunity to do that. Make one comment. Since last fall, I've had the opportunity to listen, be engaged in conversations, and to observe conversations in places like Facebook and other places. I have come to believe that there is an answer. There's an answer that everybody can live with. When I listen to what people are saying now, I think there is an answer there. And it's not one that's going to be half the town wins and half the town doesn't, because we need a supermajority in order to be able to move ahead. So the hope is that that's the spirit, that's the tone. We're hoping that all of you can at least set the right course for that conversation. Now, we'll get into the details after the town meeting. That's what we're looking for right now.
So in that spirit, I'm looking for a link that I can actually get into the Zoom so I can see. So I think at this point, Owen, so is there anyone who would like to come up and speak here now? Anyone feel like breaking the ice? Should we bring somebody over on Zoom? So Robert, I see.
You know my first name.
I do.
Uh-oh.
This is, so come on up. I do need you to come up here so that we can have it recorded on the.
I didn't wear my good shirt today.
That's, nor did I.
Okay.
We're all cash here.
Right.
Oh, is there? Okay.
There's no arrows on the floor.
I know. I don't even, stop.
Not even
I'm
there.
sorry.
This
This is what happens when you are the guy who breaks the
Oh,
ice.
this is not intimidating.
No.
Oh, come on, you can cope.
I've known Pete.
So when did you first get interested in the Supreme Court?
Yes, I did.
I guess, without getting into Robert Herb Zuber 7 Cross Street, because I think that's how we do things. in town.
That seems to be the way it
Yeah,
is.
okay.
So come on.
So for me, throughout the entire process, the last time, and for me, it was about data points. I mean, we had a couple of data points along the way with, I think it was Springtown meeting and other survey type of things that were done during the lead up to the town meeting vote and the actual election, the ballot vote. And for me, I'm not a statistician by any means, but when I started looking at the populations of people that were taken in those surveys, those were significant for the town. I mean, you don't need 4,000 people to get, oh, this is the way things are going. And for me, I started looking at those and going, is that support there? Like, and from the committees and the things that were going on, it was, don't worry about it. We have the support. This is going to work. But the numbers didn't say that. Like the actual data, and we live in a completely data-driven society. So to hear the messaging coming from again, I don't want to talk history, but again, it's in general, the messaging that was coming was we have the support, this is going to move forward and all of that, when the data didn't say that and didn't back it up. And whether or not we had chances to, ask for extent, and this was like root in pandemic time, when rules were probably as flexible as they're ever going to be. I just really didn't think we took full opportunity of looking at those and just saying, maybe we don't. Maybe we don't have the support for this. Maybe we really, and so I guess I'm just saying going forward, we should take those things seriously, really seriously. When we do take surveys, when we ask people, are you comfortable in doing this or that or whatever, we do not dismiss and we don't say they don't know, they're not the experts, they don't, all of that kind of stuff, which really not only makes people feel excluded from the process and maybe a little bitter about the process, but really just doesn't say when you get, we went through the town, the special town meeting where it didn't fly. And then we went through the ballot again where it didn't fly. And then we had 5 data points that all said the same exact thing. And so I think we need to be, if moving it forward, no matter what the survey says in terms of the results, depending on the questions we ask, and we should ask questions. Like, again, we need to take that feedback seriously and not say, don't worry, it will work next time. It will work this time. It will work, because guess what? We got to the final vote and it didn't work. And we can't say, well, everything else pointed to the fact that it was going to work, because it didn't. It just absolutely didn't. So for me, taking all the emotion, taking all the, oh, the town needs this type of stuff, which we all know we need it. And just looking at those numbers, there was nothing in those numbers that say, let's just plow ahead and we're good. And to me, that was the biggest shock out of the whole process. Experts would look at those numbers and say, we don't have the support and we need to do something different. And again, it may have been change in messaging. It may have been better messaging. And for me, this is just not the project that the town wants at this time. And maybe the size, scope, whatever it was, the numbers were there. And I don't think that was respected. And I think that needs to be respected going forward. If the data says it's not flying, we can't just say, don't worry, we'll handle that. That shouldn't be the response to that. What I appeared to happen, or what I saw was happening in the last go around. That's my 2 cents.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Can you tell me specifically where you feel like you got your data the most, your information about the project? Where do you feel like, where did you get it as a
Okay,
townsperson? I'm going to ask everybody this because
Okay.
I want to know.
Thanks for not singling me. No.
Well, I'm
again,
sorry.
I went to a handful of the visioning sessions.
Okay,
I
you
went
went
to
to
the
visioning.
meetings when I could.
Mhm.
Of course, you probably know my first name from Facebook, so probably there. I tried to get, for me, until there's a price tag on something, not for me, but let me rephrase that. I think a
Yeah,
lot
that's
of
valid.
people, until there's a price tag,
Mhm.
until there was that final vote. I mean, I was shocked. I stood on the corner for a long time. I was absolutely shocked at the number of cars that I saw coming into into Ice House Road. But it was until that time even the loop around, for the special town meeting, until there was a $80 million, price on the table, that is what drove people, to be there, at the end of the day. I think it all works. I think it's all, and again, I don't know. I can't say I'm not a communications expert. What's the best way to do things? But I think if there was more like point and counterpoint instead of like this is the way that this is the best way, period. And I think there was some of that. And again, I think that's not an inclusive way of handling, and you can't, again, you're not going to make anybody happy. The goal is to get 67% of the people behind this so that you go to the special town meeting and it's like, whew, we got 68.2%, but at least you go to the ballot vote and it's the slam dunk, way over the 50% that you need. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. But I mean, from what I heard and what I saw, it was also a lot of people felt that it was done before, the plan was done before it was really like, hey, what do you think of this? So I think there was, to some extent, there was okay, you have a $70 million building. It's going to be at Wheelock. It's going to have learning stairs. It's going to have this. It's going to have that. It's going to have that. And even some of the early visioning sessions that I went to weren't really question and answer type of things. They were like, hey, we need to meet, this educational thing and that, and we're doing this and we're doing that. And we want these big windows and we want this and we want that. And it wasn't really like, do the people in the room want that? Like, do they see that? Do they actually see something? Like, it was never like, hey, there's the potential of a reno on the table. Back in the very early, visioning sessions, it was more like, hey, look at this beautiful new thing we can build. So you kind of look at that and you go, well, was that decided already? Or are we actually in a visioning session to say, what might the town want, moving forward? And those were, I'm looking at the number of people here. They actually had more people than even that were here at the early visioning sessions. I mean, they filled a big room and the cafeteria in Dale. So again, I don't think there's any good or bad or whatever way. I mean, I don't think you're going to get a lot of people who come out to every single meeting. Even a meeting like this, you assume that because it's not in the high school gymnasium that you're going to get 400 people turning out for a meeting like this. And again, but I just really think that I think more questions, more like, can you stomach a 1,000 or what is 850 or whatever it turned out to be, average tax increase for what we're intending to do? Oh, that's a money question. Lots of people get on board, I guess just going back to my entire, I guess my 2 points are that believe the numbers. If you're going to go out and you're going to do surveys and you're going to, ask people where might you like the school, and a certain percentage say over here and a certain percentage say over here, it's significantly different. You go, okay, maybe we should consider that because later on that could be a roadblock, that could be a stumbling point, not just go that and people didn't know enough about it, So we know what we're doing because, like Gus said, this is a town decision. This is, well, we have to 12,000 people, 13,000, 9,000 voters, or 8,000 voters. Or we have 4,000 turnout, 4,500 at the ballot. It was some great number, amazing number of people turned out. But again, it's for me, it's about how to make people feel included. And I think if they feel more included, and I'm not saying, like you said, not everyone's going to get what they want, but at the end of the day, if they feel listened to, I think they're more they're more apt to say, okay, I'm not going to win that one, but I still support the school in town, as opposed to, hold on a second, this whole decision was made already. So then they're telling me the price of it, and now I'm kind of upset that there wasn't this kind of input. And so I think there were some anger no votes against it. I think there were some legitimate, everyone talks about the percentage that will vote no if the taxes are going up, period, end of story. And then there were, and then you had the rest. You had the people who were on one side or another and just kind of, dug in the heels and went from there. Do I feel like we can get to where we need to be? Yes. Do I feel like I think we can be more creative with what we decide to do instead of necessarily just saying, but let's build a building, let's build another building, let's build, can we somehow even get to more, in 2015, I'll take personal, I threw out an idea that said, maybe I heard the thing about making campuses, getting more kids into a single school, get more grades into a single location, preventing transitions, reducing anxiety, all for it. I think those are all great things. Do we have the potential to, do something like expand Wheel Up or expand Memorial and say, then we still have Dale to possibly do a community center later on. Like, do we have unique options? And again, especially, if we're going to do it our own versus MSBA versus, MSBA locks us into a lot of things, 900 square foot classrooms and this and that. And, I'm not saying it's bad or good or whatever. It's a set of rules that we have to abide by. So do we actually decide to say, and I think if people maybe saw more of these, more of hey, we have these options. And I'm not saying the final, it was basically by the time that everyone saw the sheet of pricing and all of the buildings and all of that kind of stuff at one meeting over Zoom that I think got cut off. I think that was one of the bad Zoom meetings. I think everyone was like, hold on, why couldn't the ad reno be enough? No one was really sure about why that, the price looked pretty good. Why aren't we figuring out how to do that? Park and Rec came up later on in the process. Why couldn't, if we potentially didn't do MSBA, could we actually do a building that had both? Can we get creative? We have a whole bunch of smart people in this town. And so for me, part of it was it seemed like we were just kind of plunking a building and following the rules of the MSBA. And, that was it. That was the plan, and that's the road we were going down. And again, I think that it appeared at least that was decided very early on, and everything fell into line with that. So again, I don't know, but I think if there are no set things going into the process, I think if we completely look at it and we say, we don't have preconceived notions, and that's going to be really hard to do because of exactly what we just went through over the past 2 years. I know it's longer, but 2 years of fun times in the town. I think that's how you're going to get to the 67%. I think if you really, everyone says, okay, we're open-minded and we're not going to go back down this, we could potentially go back down the same road, but we're not going to be that's the only way we can go. I think that's how you bring people back into the fold. I think that's how you, again, start getting more consensus. I think if you plunk down an MSBA exact building, that is going to be, and again, I'm not saying it's the right or the wrong thing, but in the same place, in the same size, doing all the same things again, I think you're going to go down the same road with everything else too. I think you're going to, did anyone listen? So, okay, I got winded.
I have one question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you tell me how you would conceive of a centralized or way of being able to have an SBA or a town project in which there is, I'm sorry, School Building Association, wait, MSBA. Sorry,
too many
for the
acronyms.
school SBC,
Yes.
MSBA, and I am right there in Alphabet City with you. How does the town, and that's just a noun, get that information to you to say, okay, this is really important that you get engaged now. We've got a decision now. How do we get direct information to people? And I'm also going to ask the rest of you, please give me your ideas about how does that happen? We have an opportunity now before the school buildings is even
Conceived.
brought together that they can hear how we do that. What, we have the option of sending out a blast to every family that has children attending the public schools, but the town doesn't get to do that. And then we end up missing, like we can't do that to the town, right?
Yeah.
So how do we kind of put those pieces in place? Because you're right, it is a town as well as a school project.
Pete and I years ago used to have conversations about how to better market to the town.
Right.
We had technology for that. Yeah. How do we actually create something? Or, again, I hate spending money on this kind of stuff, but like, how do we do something that better, again, so you don't have to be in a point in town. It's like my kids are almost out of the schools, so I'm going to lose information because I'm going to be leaving the schools and I'll be like, oh, really, that's happening? Even things, like even the little things, like things that happen at the Zula. Like if you're not in certain circles or in certain whatever, maybe new in town or this or that, I'm not new in town anymore. But how do you, and I think this is a question for the town. Like how do you get, the town has everybody's phone numbers, correct? Like, or access to everybody's phone numbers.
It's generally meant for emergencies.
Yeah, I know,
too,
but I'm just
it's
saying
kinda,
some type of, whether it's email, whether it's,
Text
something.
things. But that's more of an opt out than an in, than an opt in, because I think that, there was like we kept on asking people for their emails, but then that's always within your same echo chamber, right?
Yeah, no,
and then so
tough.
there's that whole
really tough.
This is not the last project we're going to have. So maybe we need to be thinking more holistically as town, as opposed to, like school and town, and how do we get those communication kind of things in there?
I mean, I work at a university.
You don't have to solve it.
Yeah, I know.
Don't worry about it.
University that's about the same size as the town, 15,000 people.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get information out there. And they're all literally in the same business. We all know each other's emails, are able to blast out things and all that. And there's even hesitation to doing that in a community that's all kind of on the same page, as opposed to a town where everyone kind of comes and goes. We all live in the town, but we know a couple hundred people in the town, out of the 12,000 that live here. So again, that's a really kind of
it's a dinger of a problem, isn't it?
So the first
I have
survey.
slightly different question for you on this topic, though.
And then we should probably
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Scare everybody else is
I'm
scared to
scared
get
to
up
the
here because where Bob's been up here for so long. You said something earlier about present the public with options, but don't present, here's how it works, here's how it's going, here's the railroad tracks. And we just had a conversation that started to feel to me like, how do we pump the information out to tell you all what we're doing? So my question is, what is it? And it's all complex stuff. So it's not like, oh, we'll just give you a 5-minute capsule and you'll understand everything that's going on in the project. So somewhere there's a whole lot of data. And I'm trying to picture how we engage the town at critical points in time where the decision is yet to be made, so that the people hear what the options are. And the tricky part is that some of these decisions are complex. So it's kind of like, well, we'll give you the option. You're not the expert, but we kind of want to let you know what we're thinking and why we're thinking it and what these options are. And we'd like your feedback and your reaction to that. And that's a different communication process than just how do we pump information out to people. Any thoughts about what you'd like to see the town do for that front part of it?
I think that it kind of meshes too, right? Like it
has to somehow, because just the sheer volume of data.
Yeah, and so, I guess, because I've seen multiple projects, since, the 20 years I've lived in town. and for me, it was always see, I wished there were more concrete choices at the beginning. So instead of saying that, well, we're gonna go down the process and you know, it feels like we make decisions at the beginning and then we go full tilt and then it's like, here's your option at the end. Instead of at the beginning saying that we have 3 or 4 concrete that we don't all agree with, but they're all kind of unique in their own way. And, you know, this one we estimate is going to cost, again, it doesn't have to be exact, but at least we can say, you know, out of these 4, out of these 5, we're going to pick one. You know, instead of saying kind of like, well, there's 3 small variations. Like, I think if there were more kind of distinct choices and ideas at the decisions. Yeah, I'm getting wordy, yeah.
And I wasn't an expert, but your MSBA process had milestones or gateways that you had to gain approval.
Yep.
What if, as we're talking about this, there were milestones or gateways amongst the community?
Yeah.
And we have to hit certain thresholds or, you know, support in order to advance. And I'm not saying necessarily we do it, but that conceptually captures
Exactly,
what you're
because that goes
describing.
back to my,
It's
I
like
think
from the beginning, that's built into your process.
the early survey, I think one of the first surveys was it location?
Yeah.
It was location, and it was 400 people. I don't know how many replied. It was a couple hundred people, I think, replied to it. And
So
it,
let's talk about
But
going
what-
forward.
but one,
It's
no,
gonna be-
I'm not
just saying
talking about that
something
one
like
thing, but I'm talking about the concept of when you get a number, when you get a data point, when you get something, you need to deal with that data point. Again, I'm going to loop back and say it just can't be dismissed. It can't be somewhat summarily like, nope. That should be a stopping point. And okay, we need to dig deeper and find out why. And we either need to change the opinion of these people because we do not have the support for what we thought we had support for, or we can't move this forward. And I know MSBA has not only milestones, but they also have timelines. They don't want you to be in the process for 18 years trying to develop the school. But so that's why I don't know, like, is it good that we get in or potentially back in sooner? I heard that at the last meeting or later or whatever. But I think Tim, okay, is a great point to say, yes, there should be these kind of, checkpoints to say, yeah, we don't have the support and take it seriously, even if no one else agrees with it. Because at the end of the day, you guys get to vote, but 4,500 other people get to vote too. So, I think there was I think the final vote showed there was enough people who thought this isn't the direction we wanted to go. And so again, I don't know how that morphs itself into what the next school building committee looks like, in terms of who's on it and what the mix is and how big it is and all of that kind of stuff. And again, I don't know what that looks like, but I really like that idea of taking the checkpoints seriously so that when you get to the next one, people can go, well, we generally have consensus on the whatever that first checkpoint was. And if you don't, you need to go back and figure it out. And again, you just can't get to that final point.
The metric is 67%. That's the mission of the SBC to a certain degree.
Well, that is
67%.
It's the minimum standard.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna
Correct.
get,
So-
I don't think you're gonna get 67% on every single checkpoint along the way.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying we've got to build that if you are.
Yeah.
If every step along the way is 67% of the residents have to say yes. I'm not saying every step, but that's.
Well, I think it goes back, I appreciate, Robert, when your opening remarks where if early on the signal is X and the town is not responding to X, it's responding to Y, there's a red flag that says, wait a minute, what can we go to the people that asked for something? And that was, and X is larger than Y. That's where I think a session like this, and then that session of, what are the families, especially the young families that are gonna have kids going from kindergarten, hopefully straight through high school, what are they looking for, I don't even wanna get into location, it's really, what are they looking for? When I moved to Medfield, middle of my sophomore year, it was a 3-grade high school, it was sophomore, junior, senior. right? So I've watched in this town, the schools shift around, where grades are, so we don't have to be married to where kids are today and what grades are in certain buildings. But can we think about it as we move forward and we start getting this feedback, what do people wanna see? So when we hear the term campus, I get that. So push everything off the table and say, what should we be looking like? And those are the type of questions that we're gonna get the feedback. And what will be hard, and this isn't gonna be an easy decision, if everything that comes back is still 50-50, we've gotta find out what is going to sway to a majority, right? And that's not an easy task, but if you do it and you're honest and you're upfront and you're transparent, you get people to at least come and give you the answers. And if you have to give answers that they may not like, if you do it again in an honest, upfront, transparent way, they can at least look at it and say, okay, these are the facts, I understand what you're doing, what you're doing.
It's gonna be hard because
Yeah.
I mean, even though we're months out from the, all the stuff that went on, I think there's probably still a good deal of, underlying, simmering, about the process. So when people start hearing about the process again, it's not that long ago. So again, it's gonna be more challenging than I think the first time even, because there was a lot of that.
I hope that the school committee bylaw group, I hope that just that sends a signal that we're gonna start off with a different foundation. We are engaging different components of the community. So when we start responding by listening and then acting on that, I think just that new committee starts to send the right signal.
Yeah.
Right? Because, and even the people that are in the bylaw group right now, a vast bit of knowledge, especially having been on, a lot of those guys and gals have been on so many different committees, they bring a wealth of knowledge. So those are the type of things that it's baby steps, right? This is not gonna be one big leap and we're at the finish line. But the little baby steps, the little bits of, you can trust us, we're listening. I mean, I'll sit here right now, I'm the new selectman in town. I ran because it is absolutely positively imperative that we listen to the voices of Medfield. And I've said this when I sat across from Mike Marcucci, whom I think the world of. I'm like, Mike, when we start telling the citizens of this town, hey, listen to the committees, kind of pay your taxes. Like, no. The committees are a starting point in my mind, but listening to the citizens, listening to what they really want is going to be so vital. That right there starts to build the right type of trust. When you get the trust, you can start to get the majority. When you get the majority, we can make 67%, being more like, what was it, Ashland, that got 97%? I mean, that's what we want. It's something we're not even have to question. We know we've listened, we know we're going the right direction. We're not gonna get everybody, but we're gonna get a significant majority.
And I think if it goes kind of like, almost like a ping pong table where, ideas are put out, they're sounded off the community, and then the committee says, okay, we're not in 100% agreement with what people are saying, but people are saying that.
Yeah.
So, win some, lose some, give and take and all that. I think that's how you get to the 67%. And I really, no one expects 100% of everything. But, again, I think a lot of people also don't, they want to feel like part of the process, and they can go to the poll and go, well, it's not everything that I wanted, but I'm comfortable with it. And that's a yes. Okay. And I think that's the 67 and the above 50 at the ballot.
And that goes to your question about process, like how do we make sure?
I'm gonna call rep, I'm
Yeah.
gonna be a rep here.
Thanks.
The issue
It's-
we have
yeah.
here is we want to hear what your concerns are about what these things, we're not actually trying to prognosticate on what the future will bring.
No,
And
again,
we're not trying to structure anything. We're not even trying to resolve issues here.
okay.
What we're looking for is inputs on things you think we need to keep in mind as we move forward. So we're getting down into some weeds.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Wouldn't do that.
But Robert, as I wrap up what you said, you would like to see more data points specifically around process, when there are data points, either be it through process or through information that is gathered.
Process / decision points. Like
Yes,
when there's
got it.
important, like there were definitely important decision points which
Mhm.
came out of this past thing we
Yeah.
went through.
And
so
a little bit
those-
more-
Those need to be sounded off against the community
Okay.
before it gets moved on to the next one. And then the process gets so far down the road, it's really hard to pivot or change or be flexible, and that's completely understandable.
And those milestones you're talking about may or may not line up with an SBA milestone. There's a whole set of
No, I'm not
administrative
even,
things.
I'm not even considering MSBA stuff. I'm just saying, if we were sitting in a vacuum in a town, ideally we'd want all 4,000 people who voted in a room discussing things and coming to a consensus. And then we could just rubber stamp the thing and move on. It's not the way it works. But again, to get 500 or 600 people in a survey type of thing, if we can, that generally is statistically significant in a town that our size that, you know, votes on a big issue about 4,000.
So there, yeah, and there also needs to be, from what I'm hearing, a system around data collection there that is agreed upon by everyone. That, you know, like, so that's, and because I know that that's one of those things we've talked about, and then we're gonna move on to the next person in the next, because I think it's really important. Thank you though, because it's always hard to break the ice. But it does seem like there is room for the next SBC. Certainly we have asked for it, and I think we've all kind of talked about it, and I've gotten reflections that we need to have somebody who is seen as a neutral party or a professional party being able to find that that information, so that there's like a consensus around, you know, like how do we scientifically find these points, and that's
Yeah.
a tough one, and it's as tough as the communication out.
I'm just glad we don't live in a 50,000 person town.
It might actually be a little easier.
I don't know. You know,
All right.
but yeah, again, the more inclusive people think the process is, I think the more consensus, the more agreement, and the easier it is to get to the end of the process.
Great.
And that's my number one, you know, on the list.
Great. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Now, do I have anybody in the room, or if anybody, the way that we'll call people over on, hello, Bob Slaney. And then if people would like to comment online or get into kind of the queue to comment online, certainly feel free to raise your hands, and we'll kind of take people as they go.
So Bob Stein, 6 Overfield Drive.
Hi, Bob.
The one experience, well, I, you know, haven't been through the experience, I'd make one recommendation to go forward. And I think is to establish a price. I think absolutely, you know, having seen and gone through the process, the issue of going forward without a price point puts responsibility in the wrong hands. If you have a building committee, they're to build a building. You know, they can go from the Taj Mahal to, you know, statements about, you know, overspending, etc. I think that if you don't, we as a town, and you as the leadership, should put down on paper in a pro forma, this is what the town can afford, put it in the context of the current and going forward, and make a decision based upon that. I think to do that will give direction to the experts who are putting the building together. It will give context on what is peripheral and what is absolutely necessary. And what it also will do is it'll set the standard for the parents and for the taxpayer as to what it is we can decide. You know, at some point you get down to the end of the road and it's going to be a vote. And the vote was never assured, and it was always a risk. And it'll always be a risk. The 67% is
It's a high bar.
extremely high bar. So in my judgment and my experience is make a number. And then you can say, and this is what that number will build. And then we say to the school built committee, run your school based upon that. And to the town, the select people, select board, this is what the impact is going to be on our taxes going forward, and go from there. You know, and I think that should be done in the context of the MSBA as well. You know, if $63 million was too high, then what's the number? Is it 60? Is it 60 by the town by itself? Do we build a school with 60 million and build a rec center and build a community center on an existing site? Those are all decisions, I think, that, you know, when you talk about communication to the community, that is something that is not abstract. You can put that down and you can say, we got $55 million, folks. What do you want to do with it? You want to build a school? You want to add classrooms at Dale? You want to build a park and rec into it? So we're on our own? Or do you want to take the opportunity to look at, you know, we complain that the state gives us nothing. And it does. Right now, it gives us $1 million for the schools. We know you get 1% growth. We don't even stay with inflation. We should go with our eyes open saying, you know, by the way, we don't want to take advantage of a program that might be available to us. It could be worth $15 million. And that's fine. But it shouldn't be done in my opinion is, those are real numbers. And we got leadership people who can put that together. So that's my recommendation.
Again, I'm gonna go back to the communication. And how do we get people engaged in that discussion, do you think? And how do you think that we reach the largest swath of the community so that they feel engaged in that? Because, like, you know, I'm also looking at, we have 63 attendees and, you know, what, 15, 20 people here. And this is, so how do we get more people engaged? Because this is not a huge portion of people. How do we get more people in so that when we make those decisions, when we say we, meaning all of us, when we say, okay, we've got $55 million, and these are the things, these are the priorities. How do we get more people engaged so that we don't get to within 2 months of the vote, people say 55 is just way too much, or what do you mean 55? We can't.
Well, I think
Do
if you put
something
a-
for
I think if you
55.
put a number on the table, you're gonna get people engaged very quickly. If
Okay.
you tell people that you're gonna spend 70 million, it's gonna cost you $1,000 in your tax bill, you'll get them engaged. If you tell them it's 55 million and it's gonna be $700 in your tax bill,
Mhm.
and $55 million will build a school that looks like this, you'll get people engaged. I think you need to have it, you know, it's the abstract
Mhm.
that causes the problem, right? You know, you put something forward and the facts are the facts. But if we don't use hard numbers, then all you have to do is create doubt. And when you talk about communication, you know, and I'm not to revisit any history, but the compliments to the Warrant Committee, I'm speaking of myself as a person, but
Mhm.
this compliments to the Warrant Committee was,
Absolutely.
we should have done this 2 years ago.
Mhm.
So, but I believe that, not a belief, my opinion is by putting the number in front and saying, this is what it'll buy. Because, you know, the idea was go build the best school you can. And it was a school that was competitive with the region and it was too expensive.
So Bob, are you suggesting that the town government should suggest the number, or should we be pulling the residents somehow to get their number? Should we be asking the residents what number they want?
Well, I think it goes two ways on that, Pete. I think the first one is we have a view, you know, and I would say from a perspective of town management, the select board, the school committee, and the Warrant Committee has a view of what the financial position of the town is. So in the context of the financial position of the town, we can give a scenario, and it wouldn't be one number. I think it would be, it doesn't, I mean, the numbers are there already, frankly.
Yeah.
right? The numbers are there already. We could give 5 or 6 options. Standalone, do the park and rec, the park and rec, put it all in. Community center, this is what, it would cost X amount. You get this kind of a school. And it would cost your taxes this amount.
And take that choice of the 5 choices.
Well, the concept of, put the number out there and say, and then you give feedback. If you give people a number, they'll give you feedback.
Yeah. But would you give them like a choice of 5 numbers, here's the school alone, here's with the park and rec facility or something?
Well,
like that?
I think in some context, yes. I mean, those are some of the conversations. Right now, that seems to be one of the pieces that's been discussed, saying, well, let's just do it all together ourselves in a park and rec. Okay, because MSBA won't allow us to build a building that's not for school purposes, right? So I guess that's option A through E, right? But I think in each one of those concepts, and again, it's like every number, it's an estimate, right? It's the assumptions of interest, the assumption of time, the assumption of construction costs, all of which were built in before. But I think, when you give that guidance, which is, direction to a building committee, I mean, that building committee could very easily have given you a building for $50 million. If you give them $50 million, they'd build you a building. They gave you a building that was $63 million, and we said it's too expensive. Well, that's like Russian roulette, It's not fair.
I'm struggling with something in terms of trying to visualize. There's two points. Number one, in my head, trying to picture what this would be like. I picture, I think when many of us, but certainly when we moved from Connecticut in a lower real estate market up to Medfield, when we moved with a range of, it was a price range. It wasn't a target price. It was like, I think based on what I know of the market, it's between here and here is what the house will be. Then we went into the market and we looked at houses in some towns that we looked at. It was like, gee, that range isn't good enough. And then we decided not to look at that town. Then we came here and it was at the high end of the range, but it was in the range. Mm-hmm. I can picture that kind of a framework more easily than here's the money you have, go build a building. But the thing I'm struggling with is, how does the education program that the schools is pursuing, how does that get fed into it? Because that process, if it's merely a price, here's your number, here's your budget. As much as I push for budgets, so I'm hard-nosed on cost, I respect the professional side of defining an education program, understanding where things are going. I'm not talking about MSBA standards. I'm talking about just some broad concepts of where the education system needs to go to kind of, stay abreast of what the current thinking is. And I'm trying to picture how that piece gets fed into getting to that number.
Well, in all fairness, in all candor, you have a number. I mean, you've stated your number at different board meetings. So,
right.
So how you put a number down.
But not as
I'm going to answer.
Okay.
That's not an attack. I don't want to think it's an attack.
No,
you had a number. Okay.
Sorry, that was the conflict gong.
I think that's one of the decision points. When we say the number is $600 for tax increase, you can't go more than that. Then you say, okay, then that'll build a school at 52 million. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the school board says, okay, a $52 million school is going to give us this. Mm-hmm. Right. And then the decision is the person who's coming up from Connecticut will make their decision too. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go to Medfield because, Westwood's building an $80 million school and Medfield's building a $52 million school. But that puts things in context. I mean, I guess I'm a finance guy, so to me it's, but it becomes a number. No, we can say it's a lot of other things. Yeah, it's the well field here, and it's the view of the dog walk and all that. But the reality is, I think those things are manageable. I do believe that the two pieces are, how much does it cost and what's the return on that cost going to be? And I do think it comes in that context, that you go to Jeff and you go to Jess and their group and you say, okay, this is what you got. Build a school. Because what we did in the past was the best solution that the school board and the school administration was build a campus for all the different reasons. But a $63 million price tag, people said it's not worth a campus. So if you say it's $52 million, then you're not going to have a campus. Or maybe it's $52 million on an ad rental of a building. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if that answers your question, but I mean, I do think that, I think people have got a number in that head, and I think the idea, you got all kinds of conversations about we're building the Taj Mahal to why can't the kids walk home for lunch? I mean, but the constraint is how much you can spend, and the constraint on how much you can spend is how much it costs the taxpayer. So how much is it worth to the I don't have any kids in the school, right? So and versus how much is it worth to the family that has a second grade or third grader and a first grader not. So I don't know if that's answered the question, but I don't know if that concept, to me, it's.
Yeah, I think you did.
And I do think, and I put it on to your answer, to your question, Pete, I put it on the leadership to put the number down. And so we don't just go, okay, if we build it, they will come. It doesn't work.
And Bob, you just give the residents one number, you wouldn't give them a choice?
No, I would tell them, I think in our concept there, in any kind of a pro forma, you can say, this school will give you, we know what a $63 million school would give us.
Yeah.
We've got that one, okay? So probably not gonna go over 63, right? So walk it down from 63 and then when you walk it down from 63, you say, what are the combinations of it, and
Although there's room also for more creative thinking, like in other words, really just looking for how can we water this down, but it's basically still the same thing. There's room.
Well, no, I'm not saying water it down.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, build the best you can. But if the number is $600 for the average taxpayer in town, and leadership believes that that's the number, then, who are we to say, no, it's gonna be 800, but it's gonna go down to 700. Then you're acting like, then you're getting into the, you're smarter than me. If it's 600, it's 600. And then you can get, the people who build schools every day. I'm not saying that's a number, I'm just saying. I'm saying the people who build a school can bill you a $600 school time, whatever, $50 million you mean, they're gonna tell you, the gym and this, and it's not gonna have the plants, and this, you start working through this. If you really want a school, how much gonna pay for it? That's just my recommendation.
I hear it and it is written down. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Bob. Do I have anyone in the virtual audience right now who would like to raise their hand? And then I suspect that I saw you over there, Ashley. Do I have anyone out there? Well, while people are getting themselves together, if they choose to, come on, if you'd like to come up, please do. So just introduce yourself and give your address.
Sure, I'm Ashley Stein, 304 South. So what Rob was saying really resonated with me when he was saying that there were so many people who actually turned up once it was time to vote and there was a dollar amount. And that's what concerns me, is that you get people's attention that far down the road. And so kind of what Bob was saying, if you kind of put it out to the people, okay, what tax increase can you tolerate? And then kind of work into, okay, well then, if this is kind of what the bulk can tolerate, what number is that? And then what are the options that would fit into that dollar amount? So you're presenting people with different options in a price range that people would sign off on. And then you're going and determining location, determining specifics, and obviously making it so that it's educationally sound and all that, but it's a number that people will stand behind, and it then gives options that also then fit into that. So that's my main concern, because I feel like we're not getting enough people's attention, and it's tough because I met with Michelle because I'm a mom of kids under the age of 4, wasn't paying attention, was brought to my attention that maybe my toddler would be the first to go to this school. I'm like, okay, I should be paying attention. And so it's literally like a month maybe before the vote, and I'm scouring concerned citizens, trying to get as much additional information to make my own pros cons lists. So like, how do we get people engaged? Because you guys are having all these really great meetings, but people are putting their kids to bed when it's happening. So they're like, okay, when am I going to find the time to go rewatch that and find the time code where we're actually talking about the stuff that we should be paying attention to? So whenever there can be deliverables that somebody at their leisure can go through and say, okay, these are the talking points that they went over. This is really useful. Okay, I'm kind of leaning towards this. And then using those surveys or whatever just to solicit feedback along the way, and early on you're getting that input. But I think a lot of the onus is on the voters too, because we're complaining we weren't heard, but how many people showed up? So you offered this public forum, but that's not a lot of people on there. And so we can't put all the blame on people making these decisions, because we're also not paying attention. So we need to step up, we need to get involved. And my biggest thing is just trying to get people to talk about it, because everyone has their own opinions, and I just want everyone to be on the same, like, they don't have to agree on everything, but hear each other out. And we got to find that common ground, because it's a reflection of our town. And there's a lot of families who came here because Medfield has amazing schools, and they're starting to feel like, okay, well, maybe the community is not investing in the schools. And that's kind of scary, because I mean, by the time my daughter starts kindergarten, we'll have been here for like a decade, and we're paying these high taxes, but it's worth it because she's going to get a great education. But then you start to think, well, if we're not providing our teachers and with the good resources, like, are they going to stay in the school system? And then that's kind of scary. Like, is that going to start to diminish? So I want to make sure that we're still investing in our schools, and that we're in a position where we don't have a lot of corporations and stuff to kind of, take away some of that burden from the residents. So it's trickier. My mom works in Franklin. They have really great resources because there's so much commerce and stuff. We're not in that position, which, it makes for a nice quiet town, but we have to figure this out. So
But there's no cavalry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is what I'd say. Yeah.
Yep. And then just separately, I wanted to kind of talk about the MSBA process, because while that would be great to have that money, my concern with it is that it really complicates the process. So like, I'm trying to think of what it would look like if we're spending the next 8 months trying to come up with plans, it's like this Venn diagram of, okay, so these are the ideas that would work if we had MSBA funding. These are the ones that we could only really do if we self-funded, and then what would kind of meet the MSBA requirements, but we could also afford it if we self-fund it. So it just seems to really complicate it. And I would hate to kind of burn any bridges with them by, if we somehow did get that Hail Mary pass in and they offered us this money, and all of a sudden we're like, well, the town's not going to support it, so no thanks. Like that, I don't want to, encounter that. So just a kind of food for thought. But yeah, those are all my ideas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So
Again, I'm going
Dodo-
to ask you that question about directed communication. What do you think would be able to help get people who have kids who are smaller, who are, not able to get to meetings, who don't have that time to do, reviewing through the videos and everything else? What is the channel, or can you think of a channel that would be more helpful to be able to get you to understand and feel like what's going on? Like how does that work for you? Is that a town-based thing? Is that, there's no paper of record anymore. Everything's on Facebook. You don't know kind of what's there or what's happening. And it's kind of an echo chamber. It's about the same 5 people kind of talking about stuff.
Yeah.
So what?
But along that, I think a lot of my peers and like the parents of like my daughter's classmates, they're all on the Facebook groups.
On the
and
Facebook, yes.
they're maybe not participating in them, but they're reviewing them. They're
Okay.
aware of what's on there. So like it's,
So they're taking information that may or may not be accurate or feel like things people remember from 5 years ago, and
Right.
maybe that's not all, I mean, our memories aren't always great.
right.
So then
So
it
if you had
becomes,
information that was kind of endorsed by all of you on there. I don't know if you're even allowed to do that, kind of putting official things on Facebook and stuff like that, but
I think that ends up being something about the SBC and about, or the school building committee and how they choose to put information out. They could have potentially, like a central website, or, I mean, they did, but how, or the town or whatever, right? Like, so that it becomes, they're on Facebook, but there's a site that's specifically kind of only for facts or for those kinds of
Is it just, I think
invitations.
you bring up a good point there, that not everyone is on the internet, right? And I'm heavy anti-Facebook concerned citizens, but probably 10% of the town. A lot of people in Florida that are on our concerned citizens, right?
Oh,
So it's not Medfield. You see 2,000, trust me, there's not probably 1,000 of them in
It's
Medfield,
four.
right?
Ridiculous. So
So I love
2,000
the
might be.
idea of how do we, I'm gonna use an example. I have family in Westport, Connecticut. In Westport, Connecticut, they had this website of Westport Now, and people could contribute. And it was actually a profit center. But you could see, you had real estate listings, you had all sorts of things that were supported by a gentleman that ended up being like head counsel for the town. And that gentleman retired, and now I think it's called Westport Journal. But people know to go there, and if you're not attacking anybody, it's all positive, it's a revenue generator. So I'm thinking, as I sit here, how can we do it so that we can engage using the internet, as well as trying to get something out in paper form? Because I know last night when I was at the state hospital meeting, a woman pulled me aside and said, Eileen, I don't get access to the internet. Like, it's just not what I do. So we need to make sure that.
but you got the flyer? Is that what you're referring to, the flyer that was sent out?
Yeah, so she was saying, like, everyone talks about concerned citizen on Facebook, but I'm not on that. So as we move forward, it's how we look at the younger generation. Absolutely. Listen, because of what I did in the business world, I've had Facebook for way too long, but I don't use it. But I know how it works and how we could leverage it. But I don't want to think Facebook, that even that term is how we're gathering data. But can we leverage the internet and then follow that up with some sort of paper thing that maybe it's at the center that we're putting information, or maybe at the library, where we're trying to get the information out where we know people are. And then there's going to be key points where I think as we move through this process, is it at the soccer games? Is it at various events where we know a lot of the young families are there, and it's a wide range of ages, so that we can continue to get the information out. And it's coming from the source, right? It's not coming from, a 6, 7, 12 people that deem that they are the experts. No, it's coming from the source that we've all blessed it, and it's what we want the community to really, embrace.
And I think that that's actually probably the first part of what we need to think about in terms of consensus before we ever reach consensus around a vote or anything else. It's about consensus about trusted information and how that gets out to people in a way that all of us feel like that's a neutral source. Because I think that there is, we can talk about data points and surveys and the school sent some out and the SBC sent some out and Chris herself sent some out. But when they're coming from so many different places, how do you feel like that is a scientific survey, and that everybody consensus wise believes that information is correct, right? How do we can't always trust or always say that we're going to reach 100%, like you said, but how do we get a consensus that this information is something that is valid and something we can hold on to? A number feels like, this is what I hear when I hear a number. I think it's important in terms of finance, but I also feel like a number is trustworthy. It's like something you hang your hat on, right? Nobody can lie about a number. It's a number. But I think what we're actually talking about is information. How do we evaluate and understand? And that's a problem with the internet in general, right? Like, so we all kind of had the internet kind of, you mean that's not true? Like whatever kind of weird thing has gone around that day. And you're like, did you hear this? And it's like, yeah, no, that's not it, right? Or that's just a little off, or, that news corporation exactly vetted that, right? How do we reach consensus wise what information is believed to be true by the majority of the community? I mean, I maybe that's my own reflection and listening, and I'm now making you guys do that, but
Well, if we had that type of site where we could, like, all that information could live. What if
in
we
a
were-
digestible way, because we had a site, but again, I think that sometimes it becomes untrustworthy because that's the SBC coming out. And so while I would know that the SBC in my mind was trustworthy, there were people who did not believe that, or that there was a sense that they were pushing something through, or that it was just so much information, there must be something hidden there, or there's no way that you could digest that all. So how does that, like, how do we kind of come over that hump as well, right? So that's kind of the consensus issue.
There are some problems we can solve and some we cannot.
Sure.
I think Robert's comment, more inclusive, more consensus, easier to get support. You know, I mean, I don't know, it's this channel in media, or this is the, what do we say in our data business? That's certified content. Everyone will agree with it until they don't like the direction. So I just think we have to recognize.
Yeah.
One element, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but as we form this SBC, whether it's 11 or 15 or whatever the number,
Or, all 4,000 of
that,
us in a
that
room
group has
together.
to sit in a room, right, and start to kind of make some decisions. We are going to have some leadership. We're going to have some leadership to start with. Right? And I recognize communications is going to be it's a massive challenge, but we also still have to build a school.
Mhm.
We're spending $1 million, give or take, a year sustaining what we have at Dale. We're going to have to get it out of the gate. So I just want to stay, and Gus, I'm kind of using what you said earlier. I'm trying to stay a little more like, okay, it's going to be very difficult. What social channel we're going to use.
No, and I don't think
So
I'm talking
I have
about
a question
specifically
for you,
social
actually.
channels.
First
but-
off, this is, I think, the first time we've met in person, but we've had some exchanges, so there's some things I know you're on the right track for. You mentioned at the start, your mother, you're taking care of your kid, and somebody says, what about the school that your kid's about to start? And all of a sudden, my sense is that's what triggered you to get involved and get engaged. And I like the point that you made about residents need to get engaged. We're having a conversation about how the population can be fed. And I'm sitting there saying, yeah, but how do you get the residents to be engaged? You got engaged. How did that happen?
The fear of my daughter not having a good school to go to, that got me paying attention. But
So how did you find, what like triggered the fear?
what triggered the fear?
Yeah.
Well, just not realizing how contentious this whole situation was amongst all the towns. Like, I thought that would be a shoe and win, and then realizing that there was so much opposition to this new
So
school.
you picked up on the,
I picked up on the
agita
opposition,
and- okay.
and just how divided we all were. Like, it felt, at the time, it felt more personal. Like, it was just, maybe people who didn't have kids anymore, they just didn't want to pay it forward. And I know that's more than that now that I'm, more paying more attention. But at first, it was just very difficult to kind of just a difficult pill to swallow, that like they're not gonna pay any more taxes so that our kids can have good schools. But I don't think that's the case. I think we need to find that number that people can tolerate. And I think if we do talk about tax increases up front, okay, I'm willing to do 600, not 1,000. Maybe that will get people to pay attention. I don't know.
so you could have been just sitting at home fretting about it, but you didn't. Because I've seen you and you've probably had one of the most collaborative discussions I've seen in the last year and a half. Not to embarrass you here, but I've seen a conversation you've had in the last 2 weeks that's the absolute most collaborative discussion across this divide that I've seen in the last year. So this is why I'm asking you this question. You could have just stayed in your house and maybe talked to your neighbors, but you didn't. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I'm saying I'm trying to figure out how to get that gear for more people moving because we're talking about what we can do to support people. But I'm saying, yeah, but what gets the people to start listening and paying attention? And you've done that to some, to the degree you can, and I already see impacts of it. And I'm trying to figure out what is it that could happen. Maybe it's us helping, or maybe it's not us helping. Maybe it's just the town catching on.
I've just been trying to get to the bottom of what do people care about, because my number one priority is timeline. So I want a school as quickly as we can get it. And the only way we can do that is to get buy-in from people. So I don't want to see you as pro Wheelock, pro Dale. Like, that's over. Like, we're all community, we're all neighbors. Like, let's just talk to each other. We're not enemies. We all want nice things for our town. I know some people have preferences and all that, and those are valid, but we're not all going to get what we want. I would have loved the beautiful school that you had planned, but it's not something that people can afford, and that's fine. But what can we all agree on? That's just my goal, and I just want to facilitate those discussions and get people involved, because I'm just so afraid of repeating this. So like 2-3 years down the line, we're just back to this square one, and that breaks my heart. We'll just as parents, like, we want to fight for the kids and just make sure, and for the faculty and the staff who have to endure conditions that are inexcusable at this point. So.
I have 2 people online. Girish, thank you so much, Ashley. And so, Owen, would you like to bring over Girish, please? And please, Girish, if I am pronouncing that with a hard G instead of a soft G, I apologize.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for bringing me in.
First.
The time and opportunity here. I looked at the meeting notice. I did not see where I could send my comments. I have 6 factors that I want the committee to consider in terms of the new school. They're lengthy.
Hold on a second. Can you just give us your name specifically and your address for the public record, please?
Sure. My name is Girish Sahukar, 98 Pleasant Street.
Great. All right, you're all set. Hit.
I'm sorry about that. Like I was saying, I think there are 6 factors that are important to me about this new school process, and I did not see a postal address or an email address where I could send them to. If you would share that after the meeting, I will send them over. They're lengthy. I've posted it online and I can read that, but I don't want to waste everyone's time in reading this. I'll just name the 6 items here, and then I can send the full item later. Number 1, academics. This should be pretty obvious, but we've lived in Medfield for about 10 months. And in that time, I've heard very little about the academic impact of a new school. We've been fighting over, or I've seen people fighting over the price tag. I think that's personally the wrong way to think about it. Academics is number 1. The second one is schooling expansion. There's a lot of talk in academic world about bringing in pre-K as part of public education. If that is the case, then Medfield will need to expand its schooling set, and there's a whole nother audience you will have to consider. Schooling options. We don't have a year-round schooling option for students. This is almost unheard of concept in Massachusetts, where I had previously lived. Year-round schooling options were available and they were plentiful. Proximity to all residents, and so making it equitable from all 4 corners of Medfield is another important criteria that you should consider. Campus and transition. We really like the concept of 3 elementary schools and students transitioning from one school to the next, so that they understand and have social behaviors that they develop during these transitions, and they're not learning it for the first time in 6th grade, which is a fairly challenging time in their lives. And the last one is something that many of you have raised, minimizing taxes. The one thing that I had not written down on this list is something that one of the members just brought up is how do we get people engaged? I think I was on the meeting yesterday as well. Having these meetings at 7 p.m. on a weeknight is a prohibitive factor, even for somebody like me who can dedicate the time. You should consider doing these on Saturday afternoons, doing these outdoors potentially. Try and look at different locations, different formats, different areas. There is. I'm a Medfield resident without a voice, and I appreciate you folks paying attention to what I had to say, and I would appreciate taking a broader and a more inclusive view of factors like that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. What I will do is when I find the link on the school website, I will put it in the chat. We do have a forum that we're going to open up after the meeting because we wanted to give people the opportunity to kind of speak, and then you can we will have a Google form on the town website as well as the school website that encourages people to reflect on what they've heard tonight and contribute as well. So I will find that and put it in the Q&A, but also feel free to look for it on the school committee page, as well as I think Nick said it would be on the front page of the town website at 9 o'clock is kind of the time that we agreed to do that. So, and you can also always email any of your comments to the selectmen or to the school committee. And we are always happy to take those. Okay, thank you so much. Do you have other comments or questions, or are you?
Yeah, I think I'm all set. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to share my my thoughts here. And again, I appreciate all of you for listening.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Okay. Do I have anyone in the room right now who would like to give a comment? Or shall I go to, I have one other person. Is that the Sean Collins? All right. I will bring them over. Can you bring Sean Collins over, please? Thank you, Owen.
Okay, sorry. All right, hi, how's everybody doing? Sean Collins, 13 Hickory Drive. And we just moved here in June of last year for the schools. So this has been a very interesting experience. I think, I'd like to start off with some points or questions. One would be, is the town really committed to the education of our future generations and providing new school systems that our children will need for the future? I think going through this process, that's unclear to some of us. And in line with that, it's curious to see why did this vote fail? Is it specifically for the money factor? Or was it these other ancillary things like traffic and location and water and fields, which really seems to get away from the necessity of providing an education for our children? So I don't know, I'm not really on the Facebook groups, I hear about it, but it seems to really miss the point of what a community should be focusing on. But that said, 63 million or $80 million for a few grades of school seems like a high number. So, I could understand that in the aspect of, it seems like a really high price. So has there been any thought about Wheelock and the entire elementary school system and maybe trying to do it all together at once. So you get more bang for your buck, since, those schools probably aging out as well. And maybe there's a way to do it all together. Additionally, I'm curious about the state hospital site, how that's attached to the town. And, is there some opportunity to use some of that for the educational needs of the town for a location? I don't know the details about that site, only been here for less than a year. And maybe that's not the case, but it seems like a very open, available space. And I would hope some people, if it hasn't been reviewed, maybe that's something to consider.
You should have come to last night's meeting, Sean.
I got in late.
Well-
I did get in late. I think you shouldn't take that offer, $2 million. You can get way more money than $2 million, but I'm just catching up. So, but I think these are just some of the ideas as a new resident. And, I do think at the end, though, it does come down to communication and how do we get, the younger families who, like a previous neighbor said, are really tied up right now. I mean, it's really hard to get involved at 7 o'clock at night, but weekends are great. Outside's even better, especially for us to have all the unvaccinated kids right now. So, maybe it's, sporting events or some sort of monthly community event at the high school where people can get together and start feeling like a community again. I don't know, because I think it's going to have to come from inside out. And, more decisions are going to have to be made off of Facebook, because that just seems to be a destructive force in the community. So anyway, these are just my thoughts as a new resident.
Don, are you agreeing with the previous speaker that a Saturday afternoon is a good time for a meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as someone who has, very limited time in the evening, I think knowing that there's a monthly event where we can get together and talk about the school and see the progress and, get to meet your neighbors and get to, feel like your community might be a very healthy thing for everybody. How you do that, I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but I just think something basic like that would be useful to get the community involved. That's my, I think that's what I feel would be best.
Much appreciated. Yeah, I mean, I think that there will be the necessity of having also multiple communication channels, right? Because I know that 7 at night was hideous for me for a long time, and probably actually still is, but I have older kids now, so I can kind of bug out if I need to, but I know that that is not the case for a very long time, and that, that Saturday afternoons end up being very difficult for people who have older kids. You're nodding, Robert. You're like, Saturday afternoon, what's that? Right. And so there's always going to be kind of like, how do we tailor our information to make sure that each group, that there's not one solution. So there's kind of an information channel, right? But then there's that community building part that you're talking about, Sean, that I think over 2 years has been eroded to some extent, right? There are parts where we come together and we're fantastic together. I still think the beginning of the pandemic is just one of those fantastic times that has ever happened in this town, how people came together. But it is also very hard to then rebuild these kind of in-person events that we've had for so long. And that it will end up taking lots of different chunking out our communication to different groups, that there isn't just one neutral group that will be able to make a time, a place, or even have the same interest, quite frankly. So thank you very much, Sean. I appreciate, and I always appreciate hearing from new people, both you and very much so.
Sean, if you're still there, I'm just trying to visualize the Saturday afternoon thing. You were talking about it'd be nice to bring, groups of people together, and it almost sounded like neighborhoods together. And all I'm trying to do is translate what that would mean for the town side. Is he gone?
No, it's just for Tim's thing has always been backyard pizza parties.
Well, oh, yeah,
That's
so, well,
it.
then maybe Tim has an answer. I don't even have to ask you. What I was trying to visualize is whether, from the standpoint of what we should take from that thought, is the offer for people who are involved with the project to go to events that are coordinated and orchestrated by neighborhoods that want to do it, versus the town or somebody basically scheduling, we're going to hit this neighborhood this weekend and that neighborhood next weekend. So it's more like a service that the town provides to groups that would want to come together on a Saturday afternoon anyway. You have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was trying to, keep it simple. I think I would go with whatever's the simplest. And well, I can understand trying to tailor to different groups. And I agree that, you're going to have, and from a communication standpoint, you're going to have multiple ways to get to different demographics within the community. 10-year-olds or have, soccer events, and, 4-year-olds, what are you doing, right? But maybe, maybe you still start with something that's like, at least once a month, we have something outside where people have a chance to go there and you see how it goes. But again, I don't know what the timeline here is. So, there's a lot of moving parts that I respect. But I think, at least saying, having something that's at least outside of the internet connection and just like to get people face to face. So at least, when you get to these meetings and people may say, I don't agree with that, or I don't agree with that. Well, then, did you come to the group and talk to us about why you didn't agree with it? If we can't get there at night at 7, at least a weekend, you're offering the people who are against it an opportunity to come in and talk to us directly, right? Why don't you want a school? Well, I haven't seen you in person. Or at least then you can like build some sort of trust with these people, and or give them an option to say, well, no, I didn't come. Well, then what are you complaining about? You had an opportunity to come. This is an opportunity. If you couldn't do that, then why are we listening to you so much, right? So I don't know. It's just kind of like, there's no one silver bullet, unfortunately, but just to start small.
Great, thank you, Sean. I appreciate it. Do I have anybody in the room right now? Okay, so Bill Werner has been waiting, and then I will bring you up next. Okay, can we bring Bill over? Thanks, Owen.
Everybody.
Hi, Bill.
First, we'll just confirm
Yes,
that Tim does throw a great backyard pizza party, so I'll fully agree with that. Just,
Bill, can you give us your address too, please?
all right, 10
And
Garrett.
your name.
It's called the pitch and pour.
Oh, all right.
And so 2 quick points. Obviously the engagement, I think, engagement with the most impacted residents of the town will be super important. I think that, as you think about the Wheelock plan, the ball got rolling downhill with all the concerns that were talked about tonight with the water and the traffic. And once that happened, it kind of got away from everybody, and you're pardon the pun, but once the well was poisoned, there was no walking that back. And I think that was a big part of both the communication and the outreach, and part of the reason for the failed vote. So I think the communication with the most impacted residents being the future parents of the students that will be in that school, as well as impacted residents of the related sites that we may evaluate, will be of the utmost importance, because at the end of the day, it will be the noisy voices in town that will carry the day, or potentially carry the day with their opinions. The more important one, I think that all that I just said goes without saying. I think the more important one, and this would be an encouragement to the select board, and Mr. Sliney, as he made his comments earlier, right? As we talk about the top line project of the building, that's almost irrelevant as we go forward. The most relevant cost is the cost per taxpayer, and the town's going to be anchored in this $850 per taxpayer per household. And my worry is that $850 per household was going to buy us, with the MSBA funding, a roughly $85 million building with Wheelock. And without MSBA funding, and with interest rate rises, and put aside inflation for a second, 850 may only buy us a $40 million building in the future. And, the way I think of it from a finance perspective is, right, if we go do this project, we have to do this project at some point. And it's not happening this year, it's not happening next year. If it happens 3 years from now, like the town effectively has a 50, 60, 70, whatever the dollar amount is, floating rate mortgage that we have no control whatsoever the interest rates. And I mean, 1% on $50 million turns a $50 million project into a $40 million project overnight. So like, as we communicate with the town and as the select board thinks about that, massive deferred liability that we have no ability to mitigate the risk on interest rates, or I don't know if we have an ability to mitigate the risk on interest rates. We may be looking at a project a couple years from now where we get a $50 million building, but the cost for taxpayer is $1,400. And I think if you show up 4 years from now with that proposition, I think it's gonna be really hard to get it approved because people are gonna have history in the rearview mirror, and that's gonna be a really high hurdle to get over. And I would encourage the board to think about how you manage that risk, because I don't know what the answer is. A private company would go out and take a interest rate cap, interest rate hedge against the liability. Like, I don't know as a town what we could do, but it's something that we need to think through.
So Bill, looking forward, I'm trying to understand what to take from your point in terms of what you want us to keep in mind looking forward.
I think, Gus, what you need, I would ask the select board to think about two things. How as a town do you think about managing the interest rate risk? And then how do you communicate that as we go down the road of this project, that if we agree that's a $50 million building, that $50 million may be $800 per taxpayer. It may be $1,200 per taxpayer. It may be $1,500 per taxpayer. Like, we don't know what that is, because it's all going to be predicated on what the interest rates are at the time that we enter into the loan. So just like Gus used the analogy before about how you look for a house in town, right? Well, obviously in that calculus was, what was your mortgage going to be, and what were the interest rates at the time? Well, we have no idea what the interest rates are going to be 4 years from now, and so the cost could vary widely, and based on that variation, it will impact the purchasing power. So it just becomes a very dangerous needle that as a town we're going to have to thread, because you may go down a road and say we can afford $60 million today. That may only be $50 million tomorrow. It may be 80 million, we don't know. But unless we can have some sort of financial engineering around that risk, you're going to be subject to the whims of the market and wherever we are at that point in time. So again, I don't know the answer, but I would encourage the board to take that up as something that needs to be thought through as we go down the road of this project.
No, I do appreciate that. And I think that's worthy of, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I just had a comment. I mean, it's interesting because Bill opened it up talking about engagement. And then, to be honest, as I listen to the numbers, it scares me.
Mm-hmm.
And I go back to Ashley's comment. What brought you forward? What did you say earlier?
Fear.
Right? Fear about, so I mean, it's an interest, it just is an interesting perspective, Bill. It's not what you're doing, but that is what drives engagement. Do we want $800 taxes on a $40 million building? What's the impact on our kids?
And again, I don't know anything,
either.
and I don't know anything about municipal financing, and I know that there are smart people around here, probably in this very room as well as at town hall, who don't know about municipal financing and how we engineer that in. I also think that there's probably a significant, it's so hard to forecast at this point, but in terms of forecasting, is there, all right, what are our thoughts about whether interest rates continue to go up? We know we've been in a historical low for a very long time. What's that long range looking at? I mean, and there are very bright people in town for whom this is their profession. And, but you're right, it's something that we should also externalize outside of town or outside of town hall, so that people understand that risk, and that we kind of look to what timeline is actually the most expedient. Is it as fast as possible, or is it waiting for things to back off just a little bit in terms of interest rates and steel costs and all of those other things? It's really hard to predict that, but there are bright people who know how to do this. So thank you. And I do think that's part of externalizing that discussion and making sure that it's one that is as informed as possible for everyone. Thank you. Do you have any specific thoughts around the communication portion of this, since it does seem to be a big part of everything that we're hearing tonight?
So Jess, was that for me?
Yeah, that was for you.
No, I mean, I don't, like I said, I think it's gonna be, my worry is that both, time is of the essence, and I also worry that, there are still a lot of, raw feelings and emotions around this. And I just don't know what the, right outcome is. And I think all the communication in the world, may not help if, if certain things are working against us around costs and just the memory of kind of what we had on the table. So I think obviously the most transparent we can be, the more that we can try to manage some of the risks associated with the future of the project, like stuff like the financing. I think that'll go a long way in making people feel more comfortable about what the future holds. So that's just, from a finance guy's point of view, that's my perspective.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill. Appreciate it. Okay. Laurel, come on up. Thanks, Bill. And I hope that it took, I put the link to the post-listening session comment document in the Q&A. Owen, can real people see that out there, or is it just me?
Only you.
Only you. Is there a way you can make that so that other people can see it?
Q&A.
Yeah, that's where I put it, unless I also texted you the link if you want to try to get it in there. I don't know. Yeah, but I want to make sure that people can see that. Laurel, tell us your name, although I've told everybody your name already, and your address.
Laurel Scotty, 10 Green Street. On a lighter note, to get people there, Pete and I both served on the Townwide Master Planning Committee, and we had a Sunday evening
I was there as
meeting.
well. Yeah.
And we picked a Sunday that the Patriots weren't playing. It was at 6 o'clock and we served food.
And that was the
And-
hardest piece of calendar work I think that we have ever done.
So
Yeah.
the communication piece, I don't know what to tell you on how to get to it better, but maybe Medfield TV. And as far as finance goes, if we're giving options, to give an option of a campus. I may not be correct in this, but we might be the only school system in this area, if not in the state, that has a principal for 2 grades and 3 schools. I mean, if we had a campus, we eliminate the cost of a principal. I mean, there's shared specialty teachers. It becomes a much more economic way and even a more qualitative way to educate our children. And if we have an 82, I'll just use a number because that was the number that was out there. If we have an $82 million school, but we make it a campus, then I think we need to educate the people that we're doing this, but we're going to save money here and we can do these things. I've also heard people talk that there was talk that then Parks and Rec could move into the Dale Street School. Well, then that's another savings, and that part of the Dale Street School could be used for preschool. That's tuition charging there. There's more income. So you can be offsetting some of this expense with the income that's going to be coming in and the savings that could be saved, that will be realized from just moving things away. Like Parks and Recs then won't need a building for somewhere more years. You have mortgages paid off. And I think that has to be better explained in the mix so that it's just not one number, but it's an option. If we do it this way, we can do this, this, and this, and in the end, it'll cost this. That's just my thought.
Laurel, what you described there isn't necessarily a single project, I don't think.
No,
It's a strategic picture that then places a project in a context that people can then
Yes.
not evaluate it just as this one transaction, but as this big picture.
It's right. Because one will feed off the other.
Mhm.
The campus goes up, so say it's 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And Parks and Recs moves into jail. And then you can have, I think someone once said to me that we could have had 4 preschool classrooms. That's significant tuition coming in. And that offsets the school budget piece. So that gives more money for, it's just a thought. I'm playing that off of your thing saying we have to think outside the box. Let's do some creative thinking. It just doesn't have to be one way. And I thank you for all you do.
Ashley wants to add something.
Can I ask you a question?
You gotta come up so people can hear you on the owl. So Ashley Stein's coming over.
Just for
Oh, you
reference,
want me
that
to
owl
stay?
we use
Yeah.
when it works, it picks up from a long distance away.
We've had complaints about the
Oh, okay,
owl.
fair enough.
Don't listen.
So my question, I just want to elaborate on the campus model, because I really like this idea. I wanted to see your vision of, are you thinking Wheelock is where that?
I'm not gonna get
No.
into the,
Okay.
I'm just
Let's
saying.
not get into the weeds.
I'm just going to say, yeah.
Although you could probably go look at the old school building website on the district webpage and see what some of those models might look
Okay.
like.
So it'll be just a campus, like.
But we're not building the campus today.
Okay,
We're just figuring out how we get there.
got it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, though, actually.
Thanks,
Appreciate it. And thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
Steve, come on over.
I've agreed with a lot of what Lauren said and a lot of what Bill Warner, I think, mentioned about financials. In the strategic plan, I think that all makes sense, trying to get some more clarity around that. And also the dollars and impact to taxpayers, communicating that early in the process instead of towards the end can only help. All those things I think are important. I just had 5 more aspirational points. You said you wanted to put a focus on the future
I
and
love
the
the future.
process, and so these are more aspirational. Schools are one thing I've learned. Schools are very expensive, which is probably why we haven't built one in 50 years. The process is extremely complicated. It requires consensus building, involves experts, and takes a lot of time. And so for all you that are going to, hopefully be leading this going forward, for people in this room and for people who might be listening, I have like 5 sort of aspirational points. One is I hope that we will avoid delay and inaction. Time is not on our side. I think Bill made that clear in his point. With interest rates and inflation on the rise, our task has just gotten really, really hard. And of course, pursue a prudent path, do the right things, but insist on, don't accept delays and insist on action. So let's keep that in mind. I hope that we will trust, and trust is really important in our form of government. It's an open form of government. So it's really important that we have trust. I think we've lost it, and it's hard to earn and easily lost. So I think we should respect people who are on committees and experts that will put in the challenging work. We should understand and listen both to others and each other, and accept and let's not ignore key facts. The other one is I hope that we stay focused on the possible and engage together. So assume good intentions. Let's look forward, not backwards. Let's avoid the tendency to use labels. Don't let's not describe past efforts or proposals as winners or losers, or people as advocates or opponents. Let's invest our time and energy to offer changes to either previous proposals or new proposals that might come up. But the fourth hope I have is that we accept established facts that are relevant. Express your opinions and views, but accept that there are established facts that may be more relevant than what you're bringing up. Avoid the temptation to offer alternative information or half-truths to persuade others to your point of view. I think it only serves to complicate things. And appreciate that there are limitations to social media. It cannot fully inform, or give the necessary details of such a complicated, project. And consider that there's other forums where you can get information from instead of social media. And I don't have a magic bullet for a better way to communicate. It's always going to be a challenge, knowing that we should, in any new project, we should invest the dollars to make sure that we have help in that area.
Yeah.
So, and then the last one is I hope that we will listen to each other and move towards consensus. There's going to be trade-offs, and not everybody's going to get what they want in the new school. Be willing to reconsider previous assumptions, listen, deliberate, argue, but accept that in the end, some decisions and recommendations will be out of your control, and know that they will be made with compromise and trade-offs, or even by people with more expertise than yourself. So I'm those are my 5 points. And they're just given from the perspective of me sort of jumping into this process last summer, kind of going back and spending 3 months going back over what had been done up to that date. So I offer them as, take it for what you want, but I don't have a lot of answers to the communication problem. I think that's a real challenge.
Yeah, but got a question for you, and particularly I'm directed, and Bob, if you want to join in as well. When you were talking about, being prepared, like recognize established facts, and don't kind of throw in half facts. And I'm asking you, actually, the two of you, because you're on the Warrant Committee, and I saw what you did, and it was qualitatively, I think, a little different. Part of what you did, and it had to do with listening. And the question I have is, at what point does someone who disagrees with the main thread, how do you differentiate when they're bringing information in? The information may not survive scrutiny, so I'm not even saying they're right. I'm just saying, how do you determine when someone who's got a different view brings something in and you have to listen to them, or you should listen to them? From we've kind of finished with this, and whatever you're bringing in is not, we're not going to go through the meat grinder again on all this. You all sort of waded through a heck of a lot of data, and somehow or another, given the strained time frame that you had, you figured out some way, and it wasn't done easily, but you still fit it all within the time frame and came out at the end with something, and as much as you could run through that meat grinder, you ran through. How do you balance letting voices be heard and considered and dealt with, and then either change made or not made, with what you're basically saying is like, people have to recognize we've got established facts and we need to move on?
Well, I mean, that's a delicate balance, right? We can't study and listen to things forever, right? You need to sort of make decisions and stick to timelines and move on. But But I think that, you know, I said this in my comments when we at the Warrant Committee. I don't think the process wasn't perfect, right? For a lot of reasons. I don't want to rehash that, but so I think it could have been better. That the listening part, the communication part, and stuff like that. Part of it is, I think, the engagement and communication side. It's a push-pull thing, right? You want people to engage and you want to push information out, but
that was the insight I was looking for. Is
Yeah.
there any good
yeah,
thing for us to take away from the future that gets right at what you just said?
yeah.
Maybe it's just it's hard.
I think that I think when they pick a new OPM for the project, I think that should be a priority.
Yeah.
Of whoever that OPM is. How good are you engaged? Because, you know, let's put it, we're all very busy. We have other things on our plate to handle. But that OPM can, you know, we pay the money and they should be they should take that role on of trying to be, you know, the point person.
Right.
To make sure that those that outreach is happening and that there's, you know, there's a lot of communication going back and forth because, you know, I know the communications committee tried their best, but, you know, that's not their
It's a
full-time
Herculean
job.
effort, and it's not your full-time
Yeah, I
job,
mean,
and
it's,
people.
but I think making that a priority of the new, whoever that OPM is gonna be, that should be, you know, one or two top priorities for selecting somebody. Like, where have you done this before? How did you go about it? And, you know, that's my recommendation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Appreciate it. Owen, do I have anybody else in the queue? Okay, and then we are at just about 9 o'clock. So should we have Megan be our last? Megan? Megan, sorry.
Megan.
Sorry, I couldn't see the spelling. So if you want to bring Megan over, thank you. And then-
I guess we should ask, is there anybody who would be violently opposed to having this as the final question, either online or in the room?
I don't see any violence online because I don't have that picture, but if it's out there, maybe it's better you're online. Okay, Megan, go right ahead.
Hi, everyone. I will be quick. And I thought Stephen added a lot of really good context to how the decision and process should go forward. And I just want to say, actually kind of building on what Laurel said, in terms of developing, and 36 Wichita Road, I didn't say that, developing a whole master plan concept for what the whole thing is. And then I know Mr. Sliney suggested we needed to land on the price kind of early on. I think consensus on the location early on would just allow the project to move forward in a different way. And I think it was just too much of a variable. There were just too many variables that people kept throwing out without consensus the last time. And I think more than price, it was location that there was no consensus on. So that's my recommendation and thought. And you guys are working very hard and I appreciate all of that.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
All right. So I believe that the doc link has been posted in the Q&A, or did this ever happen? If not, it is on the school committee page on the sidebar, which is on the Medfield Public Schools. And then you go to their homepage, pull down school committee, and it will be on that sidebar there. And Nick told me that would be on the town website, but I'm not great enough at multitasking right now to find all of the places it could be. But that will be open for a week.
Medfield.net and then town.medfield.net.
Yes, both.
Great.
Because kumbaya, this is a joint project, right? Like we do intend to continue to make sure that we are really touching base throughout the time that we do this and build this together. So thank you to everyone who commented tonight. I am going to close out our meeting. So
Could I just make one
Please.
closing comment? we talk a lot about what we need to do. We've had a little bit of reference to where the differences were. I firmly believe that this entire town is at least 95%, if not more, unified around the need for a new school. So, we have something to build on. I think there are a lot of good points that came out today, but let's recognize that the gap we have to cross is not the basic fundamental gap. It's actually a more specific gap around what's the best way to go about doing this. And I'm actually, as I said, because of some conversations and things I've read in the last 2 weeks, I'm actually optimistic that gap isn't even as big as we might have assumed it was if we can be creative and think out of the box.
What's the next step? What's the next step?
Well, I do know that we are going to have this discussion, or have a discussion about this. Probably I'll put it on the agenda for next week and for our school committee meeting. And then I assume that Gus and I can kind of come together and think about when we might be able to next do this. However, I would say that probably to some extent, the next step also needs to be the school building committee bylaw. We need to be looking at that and looking towards annual town meeting, which is on May 2nd. May 2nd, May 2nd, yes?
May 2nd, Monday.
Yes.
May 2nd, yes,
That is.
yes.
So
Monday,
they
May
will be proposing whatever they will be proposing or unveiling then.
I believe
Yeah,
that
I
is a
think,
town matter.
I think,
What is the timeline for them?
so I saw the agenda for the bylaw committee for, I think it was last week's meeting or else this week's meeting, was to potentially get to final wording. So as far as the wording goes, that will be available, but the bylaw has to be approved at the annual town meeting.
And I
So
believe
that's
that's
a mechanic.
2/3.
That's, I think it is, but
Yeah,
yeah.
so
Isn't
in
there a
order to
financial
change the
metric in
charter,
there as well? It's a bylaw in terms of how we form an SBC.
Right.
At least at one point, there was some funding that they were discussing.
In the bylaws?
no, not for the bylaw,
You're
but that's
talking
for
about
the
As part of
feasibility.
the.
There is an article on the town meeting warrant for feasibility,
Right.
for the feasibility study phase, which I think technically is something that should be requested by the school committee in terms of getting.
It's a good point.
There is a placeholder number,
Okay,
but
I'll
I
look at
think
my
that
number.
the actual mechanics should be, the feasibility fund should be
Right,
the
right.
school committee. And then I think the other major milestone, unless the school committee informs me I'm wrong, is that if the school committee decides to submit the statement of interest to the MSBA, that actually has to be in by the end of this month,
And you have to sign off,
and I have to sign off on it. So
which would be the
it would be my,
week after.
yeah, it would be my intention to do that because that keeps an option open.
Mhm.
But it does not, I think, for any of us imply a railroad track. In light of all the things we've been talking about here, there's a lot of things that got to get figured out. But we don't have to get on the train. We just have to buy the ticket right now.
Right.
So,
And the ticket doesn't, it costs effort, but it does not cost money currently.
Right.
And, again, we may not get it, but to simply kind of look at money and say, no thanks, without leaving any options open at this point, it feels irresponsible.
to Bill Warner's and Steve's point about time, at this stage on that issue, I don't see any particular reason why, and I would be open to inputs if people out there think I'm drastically wrong. I don't see any particular reason why any of us should be putting things in that will guarantee it's going to take longer. So.
All right. Okay, so
You want me to close
does
first?
that feel like it satisfies your next steps question? Yes, but
Lots of moving parts.
lots of moving parts. So it's a hurry up and wait kind of situation.
Yeah,
So
You wanna go
let's,
first?
yeah. So motion, thank you. You knew that it was after 9 o'clock and I couldn't remember. Anime, Leo seconds. Can I? Anime, Shaper up. Michelle Kirkby,
Leo Brown, yes.
Leo Brem, yes.
Good night, yes.
Jessica Riley, yes. This meeting is closed at, our meeting is closed at 9:07.
Yeah, Pete, can I get a motion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay.
We just like to say our names a
I
lot.
know.